Welcome back to The Drop on this Wednesday. Well, of course, we are heading into that festive season, silly season. Well, sometimes, yes. And of course, we do also get the office Christmas party, which, well, it can be fun, but perhaps also can be awkward at the same time. To talk us through perhaps how we should be behaving, Geordie Poor joining us from People and Culture Strategies. Geordie, good to catch up with you. It's come down quickly, doesn't it? But it is a consideration, I guess, certainly for employers as to whether they put some boundaries in place, perhaps, give their employees a bit of a pep talk as to what's expected behaviourally, at least, at the office Christmas party.
Absolutely. Yes. Good morning, Andrew. It certainly does come around very quickly. This, I think, is a watch out, not just for employers, but also for, and as much so, if not more so, for employees. And it's funny because really we're not talking about anything that hasn't been spoken about for the better part of the last two decades at least, in terms of issues or incidents that arise for organisations alarmingly regularly and frequently. And that might come as a surprise to some viewers, that as much as a lot of this is obvious and as much of this is as it is a cliche, it still happens quite a lot. And one of the things that we've noticed is that, particularly at this point in time, there's a bit of a post-pandemic or still a lingering after effect of the circumstances in which people have been working, or many people have been working over the better part of the last 3 years, which has translated into, as strange as this might sound, some uncertainty and almost disrespect for a lot of the boundaries that had appropriately been developed in the period of time prior to the pandemic. It's almost as though in a lot of organisations there's this attitude of, well, post-COVID, and given that I hardly saw anyone then, I'm going to make the most of this particular opportunity. I'm going to drink more. I'm not going to listen to what managers and leaders say about behaving in a particular way. I'm really going to have fun because who knows, we might be in lockdown for another few months or few years or whatever else. So I think that this issue is not just something that's important to bear in mind because it is this time of year, but there is a particular context in 2022 that I think employers and everyone in organisations just need to be a bit more careful to and respectful of.
All right. So, and of course, you mentioned the pandemic there. What sort of a consideration is that, particularly when we're so used to social distancing? Are there any other considerations you need to take when everyone is at the office Christmas party?
Yeah, I think that the real issue is just understanding that if you've got people in your organisation who, even if they're doing under the auspices of hybrid work, 1 to 2 days from home and the balance of the time they're coming into their primary place of work, that's still 20 to 40% less interaction that they have with their co-workers. And if you think about what that actually means, it means that a lot of the things that are discussed and the way you get to know your co-workers that happen when you are more regularly or indeed all the time co-located with them is happening a lot less. Now, some might say that that's not such a bad thing because it means it gives people more things to talk about, but it does represent a change to the sociological dynamics of a workplace. Then you've taken everyone away on whether it's a harbour cruise or a restaurant or a lunch or dinner or whatever it is that you're going to be doing, and then you throw in alcohol, and you need to respect that people are not necessarily at the interaction engagement level that they might have been if everyone was working in a more traditional, normal way. And this does then lead to people behaving differently. And I think it's often strange just to overanalyze, or might seem strange to overanalyze it in this way, but the good employers should be on the front foot in relation to this. And they need to get right on top of the responsible service of alcohol type matters. They need to be very clear with the expectations of employees in relation to alcohol consumption. They need to be choosing venues appropriately. They need to make sure that the relevant licenses and whatever else are all being executed in the right way. But the most critical thing, and where employers and managers are most often exposed, is when they see someone behaving inappropriately, even if it's low-level inappropriateness, they often turn a blind eye to it, or they put it in the, oh, that's just how that person is, or let's cut them some slack because of the pandemic or because it's Christmas and whatever else. And that will lead to big problems. for the employer potentially, particularly in an era where there are heightened expectations in relation to sexual harassment management and prevention. So it's a huge watch out. And the other thing that I'd say is often we find that the real issues occur not at the event itself, but when people decide that they're going to carry on or kick on to some after party or after event. And employees often make the mistake of thinking that because that's not at the party itself or the end of season event paid for by work, they think that they're in the clear. Yep. And we see many cases where employers quite rightly say, well, it's got nothing to do with where it's occurring. It's got to do purely with the fact that this is involving our co-workers, and your conduct impacted co-workers, and that's going to come back into the workplace on Monday or next year or whenever it might be, and it's something that we have to manage.
Yeah, well, that obviously raises the issue of liability if there is a complaint, and perhaps it's the worst case scenario that is escalated to perhaps criminal charges. Where does liability lie?
So the simple answer to that question is everyone in that mix is likely to be liable. Certainly the person engaging in inappropriate behaviour is going to be liable in a personal capacity. The employer is going to be liable unless it can convince someone that it did everything possible to prevent that behaviour from occurring. And that's actually a really high bar, and very few employers are able to get there. Even if you send an email around to everyone reminding them of protocols and expectations, that's not going to be enough. You're going to need to be doing more than that. The other category of liability, which is very scary, is that often people who are bystanders, and certainly if you're in a leadership role, if you're observing things happening and you're not taking the necessary steps to shut down these behaviours when you're observing them, you could be personally liable as an accessory to that harassment if it is found to be sexual harassment. So there's a broad approach that's going to be taken, particularly in this day and age, which is all about proactivity on the part of employers and proactivity on the part of business leaders and managers to ensure that these things do not occur, not just what you do after they occur or if they occur.
Joydeep, well, of course, we do hope that all goes well at the office Christmas party, but we need to have those considerations in mind. Thanks so much for joining us from People and Culture Strategies.
Always a pleasure, Andrew. Thank you.
See you.